everybody. Welcome to the XP Billionaires podcast, your one-stop shop for all RPG talk. Trying something new. I hope that, I don't know, does anybody like that? Was that good?
Yeah.
All right, I'll take it. That's better than, oh man, you suck, start over. So, all right, that works out.
Okay, so we wouldn't actually tell you suck, start over. That's not cool.
Well, you guys are allowed to. I just edited it out.
No, we would never actually tell you that seriously. That would be extremely rude.
Nah, it's all good. It's all good. All right. So yeah, this is Rafe Thegrim. If you haven't figured that one out already, I am a little crazy. So usually that's the sign. And I am joined by Irene Rogue and Sky Knight. Irene, how are you doing today?
Not bad, not bad.
Excellent. And Sky, how are you doing today?
I'm all right.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll slowly work on that. We'll get you to be all fantastic very soon.
One of these days. It's okay to not.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So this week we have got a doozy for you, and it's going to be the start of something that we're going to revisit every so often this year on the XP Billionaires. There's going to be no regular set schedule for it, but it's something that you'll hear us talk about a little bit more over time. So this will be the beginning of something special. So let's get right on that, shall we? So game developers are always trying to set themselves apart from other games visually in order to gain a certain edge. At sometimes they'll try to wow us with beautiful scenery, but one of the first things we notice as players will, in a lot of cases, will be the character designs. We get some fantastic designs from the game, but at the same times, you'll always find a few things that might irk us based on some of those designs. And that's what we're going to be focusing on, is going to be a series related to character design in RPGs. But in order to get us prepared for that, without further ado, for the first time in 2020,
it's time for another good idea, bad idea.
So for this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of focus on some of the successes and failures in character design over the course of gaming history. And we're going to use, and like I was saying, we're going to use this episode as a bit of a stepping stone to go into more lengthy discussions on some of these topics and others down the road over the course of this year. So the reason why we're waiting and going through it throughout this year is because, as we've mentioned before, 2020 is going to be a fantastic year for RPGs. So we're going to see a lot more character designs, a lot more visuals as we go on. So it'll give us a lot more to talk about as things progress. So yeah, so that's why we don't want to set a very specific schedule here. Now, for this good idea, bad idea episode, we're going to do things a little differently this time around. So this time, what's going to happen, our good ideas and bad ideas will be based on a specific theme, which is of our individual choosing. And the examples will follow suit from there. So to get started, I'll start off and give you guys my suggestion here. So my character design theme discussion here is when the graphics engine itself either does or doesn't match with the character design ambition. So in this case, I'm actually going to start by I'm going to be telling a bit of a story here. So I'm going to talk about the bad idea first. And the bad idea examples I'm giving here come from Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII. Don't shoot me. Let me explain. Final Fantasy VII was trying to be a lot more realistic looking than it actually ended up being. You can tell that from the cutscenes. The actual visual cutscenes were not terrible for what the PS1 was capable of doing. But you also had multiple sprites. You had your cutscene sprites, you had your combat sprites, and you had your overworld sprites, all of which took different shapes and forms. For me, that was a bit of an issue to get started with. I don't think those multiple sprites really helped get the overall character design that Square Enix was envisioning at the time. The blocky characters with no hands or fingers really didn't... It was a big problem for me. It just really did not look like a good idea. Now,
it didn't bother me at all because I was so engrossed in what I was doing. But
well, yeah,
that's
and
just me.
And like, this is not to knock the gameplay in any way, shape, or form. I like the combat of the game. I liked a lot of the aspects of the game, but there were things that obviously I'm not a fan of. And I think some of those things, particularly the story elements, will be addressed when the remake comes out. But when it comes to the visual aesthetic, it really was a little awkward, even for its time. Now, did they learn from this? Absolutely. Like that, as they progressed and released Final Fantasy VIII, the overworld and the combat sprites were more or less the same. The only issue I had here is that Squaresoft was looking to make their characters a lot more realistic looking and a lot more smooth than the PS1 was actually capable of doing for them. And so it like I was saying, it's a bit of ambition. They wanted to do something a lot greater than it is. And there were some drawbacks to it. Now, they smoothed them out when they did the HD remasters for the games, and the games do look a little bit better. But so I think they just needed to wait a little bit, wait for the PS2, for example, because there was nothing wrong with Final Fantasy X's designs. So that's where I'm kind of going from there.
So I think the character design was like, so for me, I guess I separated character design from sprite design. Because, like, you're right, the sprites don't exactly live up to the ambition they had with their character design. They didn't communicate their character designs well. But I will say that the character design for Final Fantasy VII and VIII was interesting. I thought they were good designs, but they didn't have the means to actually convey them properly.
And that's the whole point. Like, people obviously like the character designs. I mean, I don't particularly think they're anything special, but they're serviceable.
They liked them enough to like rage when Tifa got a breast reduction. She didn't. She's just wearing a sports bra. Calm down.
Yeah. Calm your tits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I specifically avoided the phrase "calm your tits," but thank you.
Hakuna your tatas, then.
Hakuna your tatas.
But that's the whole point. Like, how much good is good character design or even serviceable character design going to do you when you can't actually translate it into the game?
I think they managed much better with the battle sprites in general.
The battle sprites were much better.
Yeah. The overworld sprites weren't exactly... They didn't live up to those expectations. Though it was... They managed to make them so that I could recognize every character. Like, nobody was completely unrecognizable in those sprites, which was good. But I understand the complaint that they were, like, blocky and strange, and that they were a strange decision, especially given that, like, a few years later, they come out with Final Fantasy IX, and it's completely different.
That's actually what I'm going to get at right now, because this is where the good idea kicks in. The good example is actually Final Fantasy IX. So once again, Square learned from that past design flaw. And then what they did is they created a game with a much more animated character design rather than a more realistic design. Like, it felt more like you're playing in a cartoon fantasy world than it did like some realistic future Steam or Cyberpunk style game. So, and this worked way better with the PS1's capabilities. It was brighter, it was colorful, and everything was a lot more recognizable. Again, the same sprites were used for combat and overworld. And watching a cutscene, there was a lot less of a difference between the game sprites and the cutscene sprites. There's still some difference in quality, obviously, but the cartoony nature of the designs this time helped make it less obvious than the previous titles. Like, I think the moral of the story here is that there's nothing wrong with being ambitious, but you have to know what you're working with to kind of make that ambition a success.
I suppose, but at the same time, I would say that, like, the hardware and the code line that they were developing to didn't change. So what made them decide, like, only at Final Fantasy IX to go with a character sprite that was, like, more proportionate, more, like, realistic? Was it just, like, familiarity with the actual system and the development kit that they were using that allows them to, like, make such headway in terms of designing the overworld character sprites? I don't know, I'm speculating, because there's a lot of difference between what you saw in the overworld for Final Fantasy VII to Final Fantasy IX, and yet the PS1 didn't exactly change. So, this was, for those of you who don't remember a day before consoles had regular firmware updates, the PS1 did not get firmware updates. So it wasn't like they could, drastically change the hardware that they were working with.
Right. I just think that they managed to translate the art style into a better 3D model. I think that's where it kind of came from. Going less realistic, being able to put in a little bit more detail. I don't know. I don't know the answer to it, but whatever they did, like they got progressively better, and that's what I'm saying. Like they tried something, didn't work. They tried something else, got a little better, but still, needed a bit of tweaking, and then they got somewhere where it's like, okay, this is actually a decent overall picture.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, what changed in the meantime. Like, I'm not asking you to.
Most likely, you see the same thing in almost every series over the course of a single console's life. Like early games, for example, the PS2 look very different from the ones that were released after the PS3 came out, for instance. So the same applies for the PS1, same applies for the PS3. Like,
I get what you're saying.
It's familiarity, and and the people know what they're doing later on down the line. Like they're not dealing with brand new hardware.
And yeah, Final Fantasy VII was Square Enix's first foray into 3D sprites.
Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind, too, that Final Fantasy VII, especially at the end, was treated as a bit more of a rush job. Because I know they wanted it out a lot sooner than they were hoping for.
Yeah, it's actually what I'm looking forward to with the remake, is that like they can then take the time they need to make it true to their vision. Their original vision.
And hence the new month delay, right?
I'm actually very okay with that, by the way. I'd rather it come out and be like not buggy and playable than just like a mess.
Yeah, I'm still expecting a day one patch, but that's just me. I'm a cynic.
If they can like minimize the size of the day one patch, though, that's huge, because a lot of games right now, it's like, cool, here's your console game. Here's the like 20 gig day one patch that you're going to have to download. It's going to take 8 hours.
Yeah.
If the day one patch is like under a gigabyte big, that's huge. That means that's closer to the day. Again, dear listeners, we are dating ourselves profoundly by saying you brought the game home and you put the disc in and you got to play the game right away.
I miss those days. I do. I certainly do.
Me too.
All right. Yeah. All right. Sky, what topic about character design do you want to talk about?
So I'm going to talk about realism in character design. What I mean by this is I expect a character to be able to do what they're doing in the game in what they are wearing.
Are you saying you don't expect the like warrior woman to fight a war in a steel bikini? That is sacrilege.
I know, right?
The steel bikini is clearly the superior form of art. I can't even finish that sentence.
Yeah.
I can't. It hurts too much.
So, with that being said, my good idea is Chris Lightfellow from Suikoden 3. Chris's design is deeply practical, has armor in all the same places as the male knights she commands. There's nothing revealing or badly designed. She has a standard breastplate, not a boob plate. No boob shaping in the breastplate.
Do you mean that her breastplate doesn't have like individual boob cups?
Exactly. No boob
Which
plate.
are highly impractical. So if anyone's ever actually like done a basic like combat or like sword fighting tutorial, they'll like realize that if you have those individual cups, what happens is the sword bounces off the boobs and immediately is directed to the center of the fucking chest. That is a horrible design if you don't want to just be dead.
Also the fact that if you fall off your horse wearing something like that.
Oh.
And yes, she is a horse riding knight, yes. So
can you imagine like, so sometimes like when you're wearing a bra and you have a wardrobe malfunction and like one of your boobs like doesn't exactly stay in.
Mm-hmm.
That, but your bra's made of steel.
Yep.
Oh,
So
oh,
she can
ow.
fight in what she's wearing. It's properly covered. Her body's properly covered. She's good. She's good to do what she does. My bad idea, as much as I freaking love her, is Cella's share from Final Fantasy VI. Her standard outfit is garbage. It's hard to see it exactly in the original sprites, but in the mobile port and in other in other art, you can see it. The only armor she's wearing are shoulder plates for reasons unknown. And she's basically wearing a green bodysuit. She has no pants.
Oh God, I just looked it up.
No pants!
What?
Pants, woman, pants!
Like, I'm seeing a different outfit that is the one that everybody seems to enjoy, which is like gold and blue and has like boots and pants.
Yeah.
But oh dear.
So,
She's just wearing a bathing suit for no reason.
yeah. So the one you're talking about, that's from the Amano illustration. And her appearance in Opera Omnia, the mobile game, is based on that. So in Opera Omnia, she's actually a little more sensibly dressed. But in the original game, she looks like a gym rat from the 80s. She's got a bandana, like a headband on.
Why didn't they go with this outfit that Amano so lovingly created for them?
I don't know. It's so asinine. She's not dressed for her work. She's a general. She's a mage knight and a complete badass. Knights don't run around with bare legs. I don't care if they're also a mage. Cover your freaking legs. You're traveling around the world, for fuck's sake.
Also, that's a great way to just get hit in your femoral artery when you go up to stab somebody.
Yeah. So, yeah. Cella's, love her, hate her outfit.
It is, yep, okay. It's really unfortunate and I don't like it.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that actually makes total sense. And I know we were discussing when we were talking about this before recording. Like I was also talking about Karen from Shadow Hearts Covenant about the practicality of being a fencer in a mini skirt and a tight mini skirt at that.
Actually, the reason why I didn't go with Karen is because if you actually look at a side shot of Karen, she has a slit in that mini skirt.
Okay.
So she's actually got more mobility than her than it initially appears from the front. It's still not a great outfit by any stretch, but that's what sort of pushed me towards talking about Cella's as opposed to Karen Koenig.
No, fair enough.
And for those of you who are saying, like, well, they're just dunking on, like, sexy characters, I will bring up Velvet Crow from Tales of Berseria, who is decidedly wearing very little, but she's a brawler. Her whole thing is she needs to be able to move around.
Yeah, it's not this isn't about sex appeal at all. And in fact, like both Chris and Cella's are totally beautiful women.
Mm-hmm.
Like really. But one is dressed for the work she does and one is not.
Yeah, Velvet is definitely dressed for the work she does. She is a brawler and a monster with a hand that like transforms constantly. So like she's wearing not a whole hell of a lot, lots of tearing, lots of like scraps and just armor pieces on her hands and legs because those are the pieces that she's going to hit you with.
Well, yeah, and I mean, from a cost perspective, I mean, it's the same thing with Bruce Banner. I mean, you just wear a simple button-up shirt and really, really loose pants and hope that you don't have to go back to the thrift store for a new pair of pants after.
It's also that like her outfit is basically made up of several different prison rags. Like that's essentially where she got her outfit. Is she grabbed like whatever was available and put it together so that like she was covered but not restricted. And then she just didn't give a shit enough to actually change later.
Yeah.
Because it was not like It was not conducive to her revenge plot to go and find a proper blouse.
No, fair enough. Yeah. All right. Well, Irene, what are you? What's your character design topic?
So one of the things I wanted to get into, and I think both of you sort of touched on it a little bit, especially Rafe, was the idea of photorealism versus distinct style. And you got into it a little bit with like limitations on hardware. But what I wanted to talk about specifically was how both of these things, how both of these decisions can either make or break your game into like a long-term thing. So like, good idea, I put down Okami. So like, for those of you who don't know, this is a kind of Zelda-like RPG where it's, RPG elements, but not like full into, stats and gear and weapons with like visible numbers on them. It's more like, okay, so what feels good? What will like give me the biggest advantage in this fight? Anyway, you play as a wolf. So regardless, the game was for PS2, and it has since been remastered and ported all over the freaking place, starting with the Wii. And it got the exposure it deserved there, and has since gotten an HD remaster for PC, PS4, Xbox One. Like, it's everywhere, right? The game is still phenomenal, but one of the reasons it's still so good today is that the developers chose to lean into a distinct art style. And it looks like a 2D painting in a 3D environment. It's a Japanese ink painting. So all of your character models are like largely two-dimensional with these big, thick, stylized outlines and blocky colors and like watercolory, like coloring all over them, right? Not very distinct facial features. Like, it looks like somebody did them with like a big brush. And it's the same for, all the sprites, all the animals, all the environments are done in the same way. But what that ended up doing was that the character designs, while not particularly complex, are still gorgeous to this day. The game's ancient at this point, the original game. The game stood the test of time largely because the game designers chose to lean in to a style rather than trying to make it photorealistic. Like, it's colorful, it's bright, and the characters are immediately recognizable. Like, it's very easy to distinguish them one from the other despite having a relatively simple art style, right? And because it wasn't trying to push the limits of the system it was developed for, they decided to go for something stylistic and unique. And as such, Okami is a memorable game, and it transcends video games into being art, in my opinion. But it's not like it's photorealistic. It's not like the graphics are super impressive in and of themselves in like, oh god, I can see every individual piece of fur on Ami's butt. No. It's a white, solid block wolf with some tattoos on it. But it's super cool. Like, anyway, you get my point, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You don't need photorealism to create something that is beautiful.
Exactly. And I find when you lean into photorealism, like up until recently, I'd say, every incarnation of gaming is like, we're going to lean into photorealism. Cool. That's going to stale date your game so fast when the next big graphics advance happens. Because suddenly your character designs, which were like, whoa, state of the art at the time, are going to be blocky. They're going to look terrible in comparison.
Yeah, and not every game is going to get the same kind of Final Fantasy VII or Yakuza like complete rework from the ground up.
Exactly. So that's the thing. You're better off leaning into an art style that is distinct and not necessarily going to push the platform graphically in order to get something that will really truly stand the test of time and will make your game like still as good ages later. Like Ori and the Blind Forest is another example. It's a platformer, but again, it's, beautiful 2D painted, just gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Anyway, bad idea. Assassin's Creed, because I'm going to go in. This one leans heavily into photorealism. Full disclosure, I do still love the original Assassin's Creed games all the way up to the end of the Ezio trilogy. But, and this is a big but, outside of a few characters, none of them are that particularly memorable. Now, they are real historical figures, but a lot of their costumes felt fairly bland in the name of making them realistic. They were like, oh, we have to conform to the period, and the period didn't have like this kind of accessory, so we can't make this character stand out from the crowd in a significant way. I'm like, no, you should make them stand out from the crowd. They're important. Especially some of the villains, like, they were key historical figures and they wanted to be true to period fashion, but I feel like there were some mixed opportunities to have them make like a bigger impression, especially since you spent a lot of the game stalking and killing some of these people, and a lot of the time, like, the why was somewhat nebulous. It would have been good to have characters that were immediately recognizable, so that when you are going through the game trying to like figure out how to bring them down, you have a clear picture in your mind as to, well, why am I doing this? Well, there's this guy, and he has like this weird, he's got this weird like outfit that's a little bit different from like your standard Joe Blow outfit. And especially since like some of the key characters were relatively uninteresting, which like sometimes that's what you're going for, but I don't think that's a good design choice with main characters, in my opinion. You want them to make an impression, leave an impression. And when you lean too heavily into realism, then you lose the ability to make them make an impression. Like, do you remember the start of the PS3 generation where everything was brown?
With much sadness.
Exactly. Brown is real. Brown is boring, though. I don't exactly, I don't play video games to be realistic. I play video games to, like, run up walls and shoot guys in the head while I'm doing it.
But frankly, the world isn't brown.
No, it's not. It's a disservice
Yeah,
to the world around you.
Like, it's the most dismal take on realism. Like, the world is green and, grays and, every color of the rainbow. Like, actually show it realistically instead of saying, oh, it's all brown and gray, so it's realistic. Well,
so like a good example of realism done well, I believe, is The Witcher 3. Because if you actually look at the environments, they are riotous shades of green. Like reds, browns, yellows, greens, with skies that are like several shades of blue. Often like, especially when there's a storm coming, it turns this like almost navy color in broad daylight. It's gorgeous. The waters are all like, a mixtures of like sky and cerulean blue with like indigos. It's like they decided our world doesn't have to be like listless in order to be dreary. We can have the story do that for us. Because like, just because there's a war on doesn't mean it's a war on color. And also like, they can use color to draw into sharp relief some of the horrors of war, which is what they did. They did try to do that a little bit, even if you're not directly involved. But you're spending a lot of time in a war-torn country, so you notice the battlefields because there's lots of, trampled earth and colorful weapons left behind and pieces of standards. Like, they didn't just like half-ass any portion of the environment, is my point. You're better off leaning into a style than you are leaning into realism.
No, fair enough. And, we'll see how that goes with subsequent entries, because we know there's going to be a Witcher 4 someday. So
You'd think so, because I don't think the author's done writing the books anyway. And after like Witcher Mania, I'm sure CD Projekt Red is willing to take on the challenge.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right. Well, that's going to be the end of our first discussion about character design. Like I said, we're going to go in more deep and probably get a little bit more into specific topics of it down the road. So definitely look forward to those. And if you have any ideas for us with regards to what you'd like to hear about regarding character design, let us know. You can hit me up on Twitter at BillionairesXP. I'll be on Instagram at RaveThegram, and check out our streams. Mine will be Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern on Twitch, also at Rafe Thegram. Sky, where can everyone find you?
I'm at SkyKnightXP on Twitter and Twitch, SkyKnight.xp on Instagram, and I stream on Tuesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern.
And Irene, where can everyone find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter and Twitch at iRogue_XP, tweeting rarely. I'm trying to step it up a little bit, but like day job. I stream on Thursdays at 7.
All right. And check out our website, xpbillionaires.wordpress.com, for the latest on our new episodes, quickfire reviews, and transcripts for our podcast. So definitely go there, check that out. And don't forget to check out the January newsletter, which always has some fun news in there. And that's on our coffee page at coffee.com/xpbillionaires. All right. Well, that's going to be it for this week. And just remember, it doesn't matter what you or your characters look like as long as you keep gaming. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.